This is episode 676 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined by Zach Fort. He is a man of many hats at the New Mexico Shooting Sports Association, but he also handles legislative affairs for that organization. And he's been a regular guest on this particular show. So welcome back, Zach.
Hey, thanks for having me on again. It's always good to be in your podcast.
Yeah. Well, as we record right now here on Tuesday, the governor's probably haranguing the masses up in Santa Fe, giving her State of the State address. But we know that the real policy making and the real issues that we'll all be dealing with in Santa Fe come really, maybe after the first week. We'll be watching and working likewise together and sometimes on different issues to fight for individual freedom and liberty in the state of New Mexico. So before we get into all the issues we've got cooking this session, talk a little bit about the Shooting Sports Association and how people might be able to get involved in the fight for gun rights in New Mexico.
Thanks. So really quickly, New Mexico Shooting Sports Association, or NMSSA as I like to call it, has been around in New Mexico since 1935. We are a single issue advocacy organization when it comes to politics. And we do other stuff outside politics with shooting sports, but on politics, we only about just protecting and defending New Mexicans' right to own a firearm in New Mexico because, as U.S. citizens, we have a right under the federal constitution to own a firearm. As residents of New Mexico, we also have a right under the state constitution to keep and bear arms as well. And that's why we felt that it was important as New Mexicans to fight for our rights under the New Mexico Constitution. So that's our focus when it comes to politics. We are a collection of liberty-minded individuals. That's generally our focus. That's kind of the nexus we have here at the Rio Grande Foundation, is that we believe in individual liberty, personal responsibility, stuff like that. So, like I said, we've been doing this since 1935. If you want to find out more about organization, you can find us at our website, nmssa.org. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and X as New Mexico Shooting Sports Association. You can follow us there. If you are not already on our email alert list, go to nmssa.org, sign up for our email alerts there. They are totally free, and we will get you plugged in with real-time information on what's happening in Santa Fe on basically any bill that deals with your right to own a firearm.
All right. Now, oftentimes when people think gun rights nationwide, they think National Rifle Association or the NRA. And what is your organization's relationship with the NRA?
So we are the state affiliate of the National Rifle Association. However, we're an independent organization with our own board here in New Mexico. All our board members are here in New Mexico. So we're the affiliate, but we're somewhat independent, if that makes sense. So we don't, if the NRA takes a position on something that we don't necessarily agree with, we can actually, we have the freedom to do it. And actually we tend to be kind of more pro-liberty than the NRA. And, that's a complicated debate there on where you kind of parse through some of these different issues, but we're generally maybe to the right of the NRA on a lot of gun issues, just because we have such a singular focus on, just promoting individual liberty and what gun rights means for individual liberty, your natural right to self-defense. So the NRA has always had a presence here in New Mexico. We work with them very closely. The NRA lobbyist for New Mexico for a number of years, Tara, she actually just retired from the NRA. She did a phenomenal job for New Mexicans. We are really appreciative for everything Tara did. It's going to be a new chapter for the NRA here in New Mexico with somebody other than Tara leading their efforts here in New Mexico. But we work with a wide group of partner organizations, some national organizations, a lot of other state organizations, because really what we want to do is always build the broadest coalition we possibly can on any kind of bill that we're working on. We work with the NRA very closely. We've always done it in the past. We've partnered with them on lawsuits in the past, and we're going to continue to work with the NRA in 2025 and into the future.
All right. Well, the governor has rallied to the crime issue as seemingly a top priority. Of course, she's never been a friend of the Second Amendment or gun rights.
She's about the most anti-Second Amendment governor in the country. And I know you've got people like Newsom out in California, Hochul in New York, but at the same time, like she tried to nullify the Second Amendment through an executive order. I mean, this is stuff that Newsom himself hasn't even done. So that's why, I mean, we've sued her a bunch of times before. So because she is so anti-Second Amendment, she tried to nullify the Second Amendment to the Constitution through executive order. What I told people on this, like, even if you didn't understand, why it's significant, if you can nullify one amendment to the Constitution through an executive order, you can nullify the entire Constitution through an executive order, all amendments, all parts of it. So that's why it was so important. That's why we sued her immediately when she did that. So she is not a friend of the Second Amendment. And because of what she tried to do through that executive order, like she knew it was blatantly unconstitutional, but she still tried it anyway. And she expected police officers to go enforce this stuff. So that's why I say that I don't believe it's hyperbole to say that she is the most anti-Second Amendment governor in this country.
Well, have I got news for you? I wrote an article in the wake of the Democratic convention making the argument that anybody who had Michelle Lujan Grisham speak at their convention was inherently disqualified from the presidency on other grounds as well. But that was one of my arguments, is that she had so blatantly disregarded the Constitution and the Second Amendment to receive a rebuke from radical gun grabbers like David Hogg, as well as Ted Lieu, congressman from California. And, everybody else to the right of Karl Marx also said that this is not constitutional. This is not the way you should do things, even if you share her values on taking away people's guns. You've at least got to pass something through the legislature and do it that way. You can't do an executive order to eliminate the Second Amendment.
Yeah. And we appreciate you bringing up that point. Like she is blatantly done stuff like that before. So she is no friend of the Second Amendment. She's talking a lot about crime. We had that special legislative session, the crime session, where everything that she wanted didn't get through. Because really, what we need to take a step back, and she's been governor for 6 years now. This is going her sixth session.
Seventh. This will be her seventh session. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. So what has happened with crime in New Mexico in the time she has been governor? It's gone up. Since she first started, violent crime has gone up, property crime has gone up. And all of a sudden now, after years and years of rising crime, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to be convinced that she cares about this stuff, that she wants to push to get things done. When we've been talking about this stuff since she entered office, we said, these are the issues we need to focus on. These are the things we need to do. But instead, every single opportunity this governor has had so far when it comes to crime is that she's turned a blind eye to people who commit crimes with impunity and turned her focus and sights on attacking people who just want to own the gun and be left alone. That's what she's been doing her entire time in office. When she was in Congress, she did the same thing. She ignored people actually committing the crimes and tried to make more people into criminals. She's been doing this her entire career, and now we're supposed to believe that she's had this change of heart on crime. It's like, I'm sorry, we do not believe this is a genuine shift. We believe that her sights are firmly on attacking our rights and once again ignoring people who commit crimes. And I think that interview she's given recently with the Albuquerque Journal and Santa Fe New Mexican, where she talked about her priorities, is once again her priorities are way off, because she's once again talking about trying to take away the rights of people who want to protect themselves when we have a state police and Albuquerque police who won't protect you. So it's on you to protect yourself. And they're trying to make it harder to protect yourself when they handicap our police officers and don't allow them to protect you. So
are you telling me that our governor is not maybe as serious about the crime issue as she would let on?
I'm biased here. I've sued her twice. So, but at the same time, I would say that I don't think she's as serious about crime, because if she was serious about crime, I think what we really need to do is we had a safer state before she became governor. We've had a safer state without all these other laws they're talking about now. And we need to take a step back and say, what were we doing before that we're not doing now? Because we didn't back, in 2013 or so, we had much lower crime in New Mexico. So we need to take a step back and say, what, over a decade ago, what were we doing differently then that we're not doing now? Because obviously there's no laws that were repealed necessarily. Now you had the state Supreme Court and the pretrial detention stuff that changed, and I think we need to evaluate that stuff. But that was done through constitutional amendment on that the pretrial stuff, and then also the state Supreme Court I think is actually taking too broad of a stroke, and we need to think about what they did there on some of these orders they've issued down to the lower courts. But we need to take a step back and say, what has changed since then? Because it's not the gun control laws. It's not the types of firearms. The types of firearms you could buy in 2013 are the same types you could buy now. There's no difference there. But there's been some fundamental changes in the culture of our state and the way our judicial system works that's changed. And if we really want to get serious about tackling the crime problem, we need to get back to what we were doing before. We need to investigate crimes and prosecute. None of this, all these sweetheart deals that the Bernalillo County District Attorney seems to be handing out to people. I know Bregman is trying to do better in some areas. I don't necessarily can't speak definitively to whether or not he is. I mean, Torres handed out a deal to anybody and everybody, it felt like, when he was Bernalillo County District Attorney, when everything spiraled out of control in Albuquerque. So we need to get back to, arrest people when they commit a crime, prosecute them, and put them in and hold them accountable when they do something. Because when you create this culture we have in New Mexico right now, where you have no consequences for crime, you teach people crime is legal. It's effectively what happens. Because if you run into Target, grab a bunch of stuff, run out the door, stab somebody who gets in your way on the way out, and you never face any consequences for it, then guess what? We're effectively making that behavior legal. That's effectively what we've done in this state. And I don't hear the governor talking about that stuff. I hear the governor saying, oh, if your magazine can hold 21 rounds, that should be a felony and we need to put you in jail for that. Like, that's where this governor is at, when it's like, we didn't have these problems before. Why can't we figure out what we're doing before that we're not doing now? It's just there's a lack of seriousness from this governor, from this legislature, from the Senate Judiciary Committee on what's actually happening in New Mexico. Because they repeatedly every single session since this governor's been elected, attack gun rights, take a little bit more. And every single time they tell us, oh, this is going to solve it. This is going to solve it. This is going to solve it. And it never does. Things get worse. And so I realize I sound frustrated right now, but that's just where I'm at, because we sit there, we say the same thing to them every year in Santa Fe. The governor disregards us. They do something and nothing changes. And because they refuse to listen to law enforcement experts, they refuse to listen to gun owners say, you know what, a 30-round magazine, it's a piece of plastic. You can print it off a 3D printer. It's not doing anything. It's not going anywhere. It has never hurt anybody. So I realize I sound like a frustrated, broken track record on this stuff, but that's just where we're at. And it's so frustrating because I'm tired of this crime. Everybody is. Maybe that's why the governor's finally talking about it, because there's so much frustration around this stuff. When you have, even very liberal business owners getting frustrated about this stuff because, someone chucks a brick through their window, costs them $2,000 they're on the hook for. And there will be no consequences for that action. Nothing will change because of it. So I think there is a pent up frustration in this state, but I also have that pent up frustration too, because we've been talking about this stuff for year after year after year, wanting things to change, wanting things to get better, but being disregarded and the Constitution being attacked is what's been going on. And the Constitution being attacked hasn't made anybody safer. If it had, we would be much safer today than we were before she took office. We're worse off today than when she took office. So we just need to look at the facts for what they are and truly correct course in this state on public safety.
Well, aside from everything you said there, I appreciate the coining of a new analogy or metaphor. I'm not sure what to call it. A frustrating, broken track record is that is going to be used again and again in the annals of Tipping Point, New Mexico. I can only say that. All right, well, let's... here we are, 60 days of mischief to deal with. Obviously, the governor says she wants to do some crime-related legislation, and some of that does actually seem to be crime-related, and whether that's effective or not is a open question, and I welcome your input if you do have thoughts on some of her specifically crime-related stuff. But I do know that guns are on the agenda again, and I know that's really what we're here for. So, if you want to take on some of the gun-related issues as you see them, maybe prioritizing them in terms of their likely, some kind of XY axis as in terms of likelihood of passage and problems for gun owners. That anything you can start us off with the heavy hitters here.
Definitely. So, right as of today, as we're recording today, we may see some bill numbers get filed today. We don't really necessarily we don't have many bill numbers for kind of the big governor's big priority items that she's going to be pushing. We have two. The first one is House Bill 12. That's a recycled bill from the last 2 years, basically trying to expand the number of people, or expand who can file for what you call a red flag gun confiscation order. A more technical term is extreme risk protection order, or ERPO. They basically want to add police officers to this. There's actually a little bit of confusion around this because police officers were intentionally originally excluded. Raul Torres, as the Attorney General, issued some opinion where he thinks they can issue these orders. So they're trying to do some clarity there on that. This bill has actually failed in previous sessions when it's been introduced before. It's being introduced back again. Our position on this is we need to put this is not the right direction for this bill. We need to increase due process protections afforded to New Mexicans on their constitutional rights, and this bill is a step in the wrong direction. So we're going to be opposing House Bill 12 as it's currently written. Another bill that we have that we're watching really carefully, because I think it's one that's going to change around a whole lot, because it deals with the various technical areas. House Bill 38. Basically, what they're trying to do is go after what they call weapon conversion devices, or basically a device that can take a semi-automatic to fully automatic. The bill itself is 2 pages, which is actually sort of insane when you realize that the federal rules around this are actually hundreds, if not thousands, of total pages. So they're trying to do something there. I think we're going to see some changes on that bill. But as it's currently written right now, we're opposed to it because there's a lot of federal law already on ownership of fully automatic firearms. People can own fully automatic firearms. There's a number of different avenues people can go through if they wish to own a fully automatic firearm. They're all generally pretty expensive, but ordinary citizens can own a fully automatic firearm. We want to make sure that people who have fully automatic firearms are protected. We also want to make sure that devices like a binary trigger or something like that are not targeted, because you don't need any kind of special permit or license to own something like a binary trigger right now. So that's another bill that I think, as it's currently written, we're in opposition to it. We are expecting that bill to change, and hopefully it really needs to change if they're based on what they told us the intent of the bill is to do. So that's House Bill 38. So those are the only 2 bills we really know about right now, is House Bill 12, the red flag law changes, and House Bill 38. What we don't have bill numbers for yet, and what the governor has said she's really pushing for, is one, a ban on homemade firearms. People have been making their own firearms in their own home since the beginning of this country. What that's looked like has changed over the years, whether somebody has, some kind of CNC mill, 3D printer, whatever. But people have always been making their own homemade firearms. I've made my own homemade firearms before. It's legal to do. But the governor basically wants to ban people doing this. You really can't actually do it with how far homemade firearms technology is advanced, with things like 3D printers, where you can actually 3D print a lower to a firearm with actually a relatively basic 3D printer these days. So that's a bill we're expecting to come up. We're going to be opposed to it. Part of exercising your right to do something is not necessarily needing to rely on anybody else to exercise that right. I mean, just because if you don't have to have a cell phone or a social media account to have a right to free speech. You have a right to free speech on your own. Likewise, with the Second Amendment, you have a right to own a firearm on your own without going to Glock or Sig Sauer or Hornady or Remington, somebody like that. So that's a bill that we're opposed to, but the governor's going to be pushing pretty hard for. Another bill the governor's talked a lot about is a magazine ban, where basically they kind of pick an arbitrary number and say any magazine that holds more, a magazine basically being, the item that you load the bullets into, the rounds with the bullet in it, into the firearm to shoot. So a standard magazine for an AR-15 is 30 rounds. The governor's talking about doing some kind of arbitrary limit. We don't know where that is. We've seen it as low as 10. We've seen it at 20, 15, pick a number. They want to basically make it a felony to own a magazine that holds more than a certain number of rounds, or you can't purchase a new one, even if your old magazines are grandfathered into that. So that's another thing that the governor's talking about doing, is some type of magazine ban. Those are her two big bills. In addition to that, we're also expecting to see some kind of bill that would raise the age to purchase semi-automatic firearms, at least semi-automatic rifles, to 21. Currently, you can purchase a semi-automatic rifle from a federally licensed firearms dealer at age 18, as long as it's a long gun. You need to be 21 to purchase it. A handgun that's semi-automatic from an FFL. But they're talking about raising that for semi-automatic rifles from 18 to 21. We're expecting that bill. It's been introduced before. We're expecting to be introduced again.
Let me hold on right there. There's a lot of terms
Good
that
call.
people may not understand. I have been around guns a long enough time that I understand them. But what is a semi-automatic gun? There's obviously bump stocks, which are part of that discussion, and automatic guns. Walk us through what that really means.
Thank you. That's a great point. I sometimes I'm dealing with a lot with talking with law enforcement or FFLs, so I'm just used to using technical terms. So I apologize. Thank you.
No problem.
So basically, what a semi-automatic firearm is a firearm that discharges one round per pull of the trigger. So you pull the trigger and you hold it, and one round is discharged from the firearm. You release the trigger, and then another round is loaded, but you have to move the trigger has to be manually moved for rounds to continue to come out of the firearm. You can't just hold it and everything is discharged. On a fully automatic firearm, if you hold the trigger down, all of the rounds will be discharged until the gun is empty or you release the trigger. I mean, I've shot fully automatic firearms before, a number of them. They're a lot of fun to shoot, but they also empty that magazine pretty quick, unless you've got, some kind of, belt-fed gun or belt-fed machine gun or something like that. So they release those rounds very, very
those
quickly.
Tend to be illegal. Machine guns are...
You can. There are actually several ways you can, but yes, they're tough to get and they're generally expensive. It's kind of the moral of the story. So you can own fully automatic. So when a fully automatic, like I said, you hold the trigger down and all of the rounds are discharged from the firearm until you release the trigger, they're out. So on a bump stock is kind of a weird device. Our position is that a bump stock does not make a firearm fully automatic because the trigger is still being actuated for every single round being discharged from the firearm. And you may say, well, okay, because you can bump fire a gun without a bump stock by basically holding the gun against the recoil motion and then using the recoil motion to help you pull the trigger faster. That's all that's going on. It does not simulate fully automatic fire. It's actually very different from that because the firearm itself is actually moving around quite a bit. Or your fingers moving around to quite a bit to actually actuate that trigger. So you actually don't need a bump stock to bump fire a gun. You can actually do it just purely with, I know people who can do it who can bump fire a semi-automatic firearm purely with their hands with no devices whatsoever. So that's part of why we believe that a bump stock does not constitute a machine gun because you are still pulling the trigger for every single round being shot out of that firearm. The rate of fire out of bump stock is much slower than a machine gun. You're not using it in the same way you could use a machine gun because it's much harder to control the motion of the gun because the gun is moving around so much because the gun has to be physically moving back and forth for that trigger to be actuated when you're bump firing a gun. So our position is that the technical aspects are clear. It was really, it was actually the first Trump administration who really actually sought to have them classified as machine guns, which was a very disappointing thing that they did for us. Because previously the ATF under the Obama administration had ruled that bump stocks were not machine guns. And we agree with that technical classification is that a bump stock does not convert something to a machine gun because you're still actuating the trigger. The gun is moving around. It is not a machine gun. It has a very different rate of fire and characteristics than a machine gun. So we're opposed to treating things like a bump stock as a machine gun. Now, I think what the bill sponsors trying to go after in this conversion ban is there are things you can call like a Glock switch. They're actually that convert a handgun, a Glock handgun, to shoot fully automatic, where you can hold the trigger down and it discharges all the rounds. Glock switches there are ways to legally purchase one. However, they're actually relatively inexpensive to make, and where you see they show up on this in criminal gangs here in Albuquerque on the streets, because some of these are actually made in China out of these CNC shops that somebody's running, some illegal shop somebody's running in China. They ship them over to the United States, and they're just distributed to gangs in Albuquerque. And they're actually, unfortunately, they're very easy. Gangs in Albuquerque have a very easy time getting their hands on these types of devices. It is already a federal crime for a gang member in Albuquerque to put a Glock switch on their gun, because oftentimes these are prohibited possessors anyway, and they didn't go through the avenues that you need to go through to own a fully automatic firearm. They didn't do any of that stuff. This is already illegal stuff, and that's already a federal crime on these things like Glock switches. Because that's the issue when I talk to people in law enforcement, at APD or something like that. That's the issue they talk about, is things like Glock switches, which is already a federal crime. I'm not sure necessarily, do we need to make it a crime at the state level too, if this is already a federal crime and we're already deferring so many criminal prosecutions on firearms to the feds anyway? And maybe do we need to have a discussion with why all of a sudden do we need to start prosecuting things at a state level that have been handled at the federal level? And I don't know who the next the federal, I guess the area, is it for the feds? I'm trying to think of the technical name for the attorney, who handles New Mexico, but for the attorneys for the District of New Mexico, I don't know who that's going to be under the Trump administration.
U.S. Attorney.
There we go. Thank you. I guess just U.S. Attorney. I kept want to say it's not the District Attorney, but thank you. I don't know who the next one's going to be under Trump, but I would hope that we could get someone in there in New Mexico who wants to prosecute crimes that already exist. If you have prohibited possessors with these firearms, prosecute them for that. We already have laws in the books. The feds actually prosecute much faster than the courts do here in New Mexico, much more effectively. That system runs more effectively, and we need to say, why were we? Because we were handling a lot of cases, then apparently maybe we stopped at some point in time. There's never been a reconciliation. I understood why that happened. I don't know if that was some initiative from the Biden Department of Justice and why we stopped handing so much stuff over to the feds. But anyway, we're getting a little sidetracked here. But that's what I think they're trying to target, is these things when you have, these young gang members running around with Glock switches. I think that's what they're trying to target. We also want to make sure that we're not getting people who legally own stuff, who have gone through the right avenues, getting caught up in, trying to go after a gang member with something that was illegally made in China.
And FFL, briefly explain that term as well.
Yes.
Another one.
So FFL is a federal firearms license. If you are engaged in the business of selling firearms, meaning it's a business for you. It's not just you've got, if I sell a firearm to somebody, and it's not my business, I don't need an FFL. But if you are engaged in the business of, you're doing it for a profit, you're not just selling off one gun in your collection so you can get another one. But if you're engaged in the business of selling firearms, you're required to have what we call a federal firearms license. That's federally regulated by the ATF. So any gun store you go to in Albuquerque, whether that be Cabela's, Calibers, BMC Tactical, ABQ Guns, we do have a lot of really great gun stores here in Albuquerque. But they all have FFL. So when we use a term FFL, it means something very specific, because those are typically who people buy a firearm through. You may buy a firearm from a friend in a private party transaction. But in New Mexico, you're actually supposed to go through an FFL so they can run the background check. Because if you are buying a firearm from a friend, you don't have access to the NICS system, the background check system for gun purchases on your own. You have to go through an FFL to get access to that, so they can run the check for you, since you can't run it yourself. So that's what we talk about. When we say FFL, you could kind of use the term gun store instead, just to think FFL was the more technically correct term when we're talking about this stuff. But gun store would be a good substitute there.
All right. I know that we got sidetracked a little bit, but you gotta explain your terms. And for those uninitiated, what bills, any bills are we missing? Are there going to be any efforts to address the bump stock issue? Is that something that we might see here at the state level, since we did have a conversation about those?
So like I said, we're closely watching House Bill 38 to see what is and is not included. If they're going to pass anything, we would want to basically just kind of mirror federal law, in that bump stocks are not bump stocks are not a machine gun conversion device. It's just kind of this goofy thing you can stick on your gun. It's a goofy bunch of plastic you stick on the back of your gun is all that it is. So that's House Bill 38. We're opposed to it as currently written, certainly because it would include it's so vague, being 2 pages dealing with a very, very technical subject, that we have to be opposed to it, because it's very hard to see what would and would not be included. It's subject to so much ambiguity, just being 2 pages dealing with an incredibly technical area. So that's House Bill 38, where they could try to include bump stocks in that. But we're going to be opposed to including things like bump stocks, binary triggers. And if they pass anything on that, we would want it to be basically just mirror federal law. Here's the way you can own a fully automatic firearm, so on and so forth, and then make it clear binary triggers, bump stocks are not machine gun conversion devices.
All right. Anything else?
So there's still a number of other bills that could be introduced. Another one that we're going to be watching really carefully is, they've tried to increase the civil liability for gun stores in previous legislative sessions. I think Christine Chandler up from Los Alamos this kind of been one of her projects, along with Joe Cervantes over on the Senate side. So what they really want to do effectively is make it really easy to sue gun stores in New Mexico, gun stores and firearms manufacturers in New Mexico, because what they want to do is say, if you're a victim of a crime, let's say someone shoots someone else, that firearm was purchased from a gun store in New Mexico, you can sue the gun store, even though the gun store didn't have any nexus to this actual crime. They want to basically try and create this public nuisance thing where if they sold the gun to someone who used it in a crime, they could sue the gun store. It would be akin to, suing a Ford dealership if a drunk driver hits somebody with an F-150. I mean, is that the Ford dealership's problem? No, it's not. And I think it's very clear that, they're trying to just really put gun stores out of business, make it really hard and expensive to acquire a firearm here in New Mexico, because this is about trying to make a third party liable for the actions of somebody else. And this is something he actually did 2 years ago with that child access prevention bill. They called it Benny's Law, where they tried to make a third party criminally liable for the actions of somebody else. And I think that concept they're trying to do is, it goes back to the core of what's happened here. They don't want to go after the people who are actually committing the crime. They want to go after political opponents or people they don't like. So they try to do this. Well, this store sold this firearm to this person who used it, so therefore we're going to try to go after the store because we don't like that store. We don't like that industry. We don't like their politics. And we're trying to hold somebody else other than the actual perpetrator accountable for the crime, because that's so much of what's going on. Is if anybody's held accountable, they don't want to hold the actual perpetrator accountable. They want to hold somebody else, some other business, someone else who wasn't involved accountable. So that if there is any accountability, it's this whole warped view that they have up in Santa Fe, where they're trying to have zero accountability for the people who commit crimes and accountability from somebody else who wasn't responsible for it. So that's another bill they're going to be looking at trying to do again this year, is increase civil liability for gun stores and firearms manufacturers in New Mexico. Additionally, the Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman has talked about doing some kind of a concept bill around, just making it illegal for a minor to possess a firearm unless an adult is there beside them, supervising them at all times. This could largely end youth hunting in New Mexico, because you would have to have some kind of adult there present at all times, or it could be a crime. It could also, end youth shooting sports. And we were told 2 years ago with this child access prevention bill called Benny's Law that bill was going to solve this stuff, that bill was going to stop, 16-year-olds running around Albuquerque with guns committing drive-by shootings. We were told that bill was going to solve this, but apparently, sure enough, as we predicted 2 years ago, nothing was going to happen. And sure enough, nothing did happen because, these 16-year-olds who are engaged in these people are engaged in very serious criminal activity and they need help. But trying to, they're not taking these firearms out of their parents' drawer. They're stealing these guns because for a 16-year-old to be involved in a serious crime involving a firearm, something has gone very, very wrong in their life before they got to that point. And, just trying to say, did they get this out of their parents' drawers? Like, no, they didn't, because what comes before the drive-by shootings? It probably some type of property crime, other stuff, drug dealing, drug usage, things like that. That's all the stuff that's going on before all this stuff. It's not, these are not, kids growing up in great homes who see a firearm at home and the firearm turns them evil, all of a sudden they turn a gang member. No, these are kids from very broken homes who are engaged in increasingly serious criminal activity. There's no diversion for what these kids are doing because everything just passed along. There's no prosecution. There's no serious attempt at diversion. They learn that crime is legal, so they keep escalating, and then somebody gets killed, and then all of a sudden it's an issue that we need to deal with, and when they should have dealt with years ago before they escalated this behavior, because we taught them this whole time that crime was legal, so just do what you want. And that's this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, how we just created this system with no accountability and teach people crimes are legal. So, like I said, we were told 2 years ago that this minor access prevention bill was going to solve it. Didn't do anything. So now they're talking about doing something and just trying to outright make it illegal for a minor to possess a firearm without adult supervision. So that's another bill that we may be seeing. There's a good chance that Representative Romero up in Santa Fe will try again with one of her rifle bans. The governor said specifically she wants a magazine ban. We may also see some attempt to ban the probably in past years, we've seen where they kind of grandfather in, meaning you're allowed to keep your existing guns, but basically criminalizing the sale of new semi-automatic rifles in New Mexico. We could be seeing that bill as well. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a whole lot of new concepts introduced. Last year was a 30-day session, but they tried to run a lot of gun control bills in a 30-day session. So I think largely what we're looking at, including, the civil liability for dealers, the rifle ban, the magazine ban. So what we're really expecting this year is to see a lot of the bills that failed last 30-day session when they tried to ram so much gun control through in 30 days, the bills that didn't pass then, we're expecting most of them to come back in some new form or iteration or potentially even identical bill this year in 2025. So that's largely what we're looking at. Well, like I said, we don't really have bill numbers for this stuff. They seem to be taking a little bit more time introducing bills this year, but I don't necessarily think there's not anything there to read into. They basically have said, their town halls, media interviews, this stuff is coming, so we're just preparing for it.
All right. Well, it will be a challenging session for all of us. And if folks want to sign up, I assume you guys do email alerts
Yep.
and other ways to get active during the session. And of course, we try to as well, if a big issue is coming at us that we can help with on guns, we do. But of course, we've got a whole array of economic policy issues that we're dealing with as well. But to the extent we can, we will help. But how can people help?
Definitely. So if you want to learn more, what we believe is getting the correct information in people's hands in a timely fashion. So if you're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or X, go follow it. Go look us up there, New Mexico Shooting Sports Association. We're on all of those platforms. We're putting stuff out there oftentimes in real time while committees are meeting, while votes are being taken. We're putting stuff out there in real time. Also, go to our website, nmssa.org. And go sign up for our free email alerts there. We don't charge we don't charge anything for these alerts. They're totally free because we want everyone possible involved, because our goal is to build a broad of a coalition as we possibly can that supports our right to keep and bear arms in New Mexico. So we work with a lot of different groups from across the state who may have some interest in what we're doing. So, but please go sign up for those alerts. They're totally free. You don't need to pay us anything. Go follow us on social media, engage with us there, and just share our stuff and get people involved, because that's what's really key for us in going in every single year is when we start getting a diverse coalition of New Mexicans from every political party, every walk of life saying, this is attacking my right to defend myself is not the way, is not going to do anything about crime. It hasn't worked for the last 6 years. It's not going to work in the future. We need to focus on fixing our criminal justice system to hold people accountable and stop kind of this, well, I don't like these people and their guns, so we need to go after that. That's what this governor is doing. It's more politically motivated than a true push to lower crime in New Mexico. It's about because she tries to create more criminals than holding current criminals accountable, which is it's kind of alarming to me. Is, if you can't prosecute people under the existing laws, but you are planning to prosecute people for this crime, like, where are your priorities at? If you're trying to create a new class of criminals to prosecute instead of prosecuting the people already committing crimes. But anyway, we want to build as broad a coalition as possible. We put out stuff in real time on social media. We'll do email alerts sometimes when things are, moving real fast in the legislature, we'll put out an email alert every single day to keep people on top of stuff, because we want people engaged. We want people showing up in committee meetings. If you like to show up in person to attend rallies, we are doing a rally at March 8th, 10 a.m. outside the Capitol. It shouldn't be too hard to find us out there. I don't know which side we're going to be on, but it's not gonna, there'll be a crowd. So, we'll probably be relatively easy to be identified. Gun owners don't normally hide ourselves. So please come join us if you like doing stuff like that. Show up. You can testify in committee hearings on Zoom. If you need help, writing testimony, knowing what to do, just reply to one of the emails we send, reply to us on social media. We will get you plugged in with that information if you want to get more involved, how to show up in Santa Fe, when to show up, all that kind of stuff. We put all that stuff out there totally for free because we want everyone in the state to get engaged on this issue.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Zach, and to all your friends and colleagues at the New Mexico Shooting Sports Association. We will see you all in Santa Fe, and thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.